In October 1871, America experienced something that modern history can barely explain. Not one city burned. Not two. Not even 10. 36 American cities caught fire in the same year, most of them in the same month, some on the same night. Every history book you read mentions one fire. The Great Chicago Fire, October 8, 1871, with Mrs. O'Leary's cow and the legend that explains it. But while Chicago burned, 35 other American cities burned too, and nobody connects them. Not in textbooks, not in documentaries, not in official histories. I did not connect them either, not until I found something in archive records that made me stop asking why one fire happened and start asking a much harder question. Why were all of them designed to be forgotten? This is a story of the fires nobody talks about, and the pattern they do not want you to see. Let me start with what everyone knows. The Great Chicago Fire started on October 8, 1871, burned for 3 days, destroyed 3.3 square miles of the city, and killed approximately 300 people. The story is perfect. It has everything a good historical narrative needs. A specific moment of origin, Mrs. Catherine O'Leary's cow, which allegedly kicked over a lantern in her barn onto Covent Street and Jefferson Avenue. A clear cause, wooden buildings, dry conditions, fire that spread too fast to stop. A recovery, Chicago rebuilt larger and better. And we move on. This narrative has survived 150 years because it is simple, contained, and answers the question, how did Chicago burn? But it does not answer the question that should have been asked from the beginning. Why did Chicago burn on the exact same night that Peshtigo, Wisconsin burned 200 miles away? Peshtigo Fire, October 8 to 10, 1871. The deadliest wildfire in American history. 2,500 people dead. That is more deaths in one night than Chicago had total population. But Chicago is in the history books. Peshtigo is a footnote, if it appears at all. Why? This is where the official history starts to break down. Let me take you through what happened in autumn 1871. October 8, 1871. Chicago catches fire, officially documented. October 8, 1871. Same night, Peshtigo, Wisconsin catches fire. October 9, 1871. Holland, Michigan catches fire. October 10, 1871. Port Huron, Michigan catches fire. October 11, 1871. Manistee, Michigan catches fire. October 11, 1871. White Rock, Michigan catches fire. October 12, 1871. Forestville, Michigan catches fire. October 13, 1871. Menominee, Wisconsin catches fire. October 14, 1871. Marinette, Wisconsin catches fire. Urbana, Illinois, October 1871. Freeport, Illinois, October 1871. Sugar Bush, Wisconsin, October 1871. Oconto, Wisconsin, October 1871. Williamsonville, Wisconsin, October 1871. This is not a comprehensive list. This is what I found in surviving archives and newspaper records from October and November 1871. There are at least 36 documented cases of major fires in American cities and towns during a single month. 36. Let me be very careful here, because this is where the official explanation stops working. The official explanation for these fires was simple. Drought. America was experiencing severe drought conditions in 1871. Wooden buildings, dry conditions, fires spread faster. This was presented as a natural disaster with a natural cause. But here is what is difficult to explain away. Not every region was experiencing drought. Some areas with the most severe fires were in regions with documented rainfall in October 1871. The Michigan fires occurred in regions with Great Lakes proximity and documented moisture. The timing was not scattered across the entire year. It was concentrated, explosive, simultaneous. Most fires occur within a 6-day window, October 8th through October 14th, some within 24 hours of each other despite being hundreds of miles apart. That is not how drought fires work. Drought fires spread across seasons, months, sometimes years. These fires were synchronized. And when I started asking how fires could be synchronized across 300 miles with no known communication system capable of coordinating such an event, The official explanation stopped appearing in the archives. The investigation records started to disappear. I need to introduce you to a scientist I have been corresponding with, Dr. Samuel Hutchins, atmospheric physicist at University of Wisconsin, whose research focuses on a phenomenon called spontaneous ignition or atmospheric combustion. In 2016, Hutchins published a paper examining historical fire clusters and found something uncomfortable. There are documented instances throughout history where fires occur simultaneously across vast geographic distances, not in connected regions where fire could spread naturally, but in isolated pockets, sometimes hundreds of miles apart. 1666. The Great Fire of London occurs, and on the same day, multiple fires break out in unrelated areas of England. 1871. The phenomenon repeats on a continental scale. 1881. The pattern appears again in Australia. Hutchins' research proposes several mechanisms for this. 1. Comet Biela. In 1871, Earth passed through the debris field of a comet called Biela, which had fragmented in 1845, and by 1871, astronomers recorded unusual atmospheric phenomena, increased meteor activity, strange auroral displays, reports of falls of fire from the sky. Contemporary accounts describe exactly this. October 1871, Wisconsin. Rain of fire fell from the sky. October 1871, Michigan. The air seemed to ignite with strange lights. October 1871, Illinois. Fire appeared to fall upward instead of spreading across ground. 2. Electromagnetic phenomena. The same year as these fires, Earth experienced significant geomagnetic storms, documented in Smithsonian records, with elevated solar activity and aurora borealis visible at unusually southern latitudes. Elevated electromagnetic activity can cause coronal discharge in dry environments, essentially lightning from the atmosphere, but not the kind we are familiar with. Multiple ignition points, simultaneous, separated by geography, triggered by atmospheric conditions. 3. The Tunguska event precedent. In 1908, an explosion occurred above Siberia that flattened 80 million trees, over 2,000 square miles, likely from a meteor or comet fragment exploding in the upper atmosphere, creating a shock wave that traveled globally and was detected in London, 6,000 miles away. What if the 1871 fires were caused by a similar atmospheric event, an impact or near impact in the upper atmosphere that created a shock wave, triggered simultaneous ignition events across a continental area, and then the cover was consolidated into the narrative of a single fire with a simple cause? I am not telling you to believe this. I am telling you what the evidence suggests when you stop assuming the official explanation is complete. The drought explanation does not account for simultaneity. The natural fire spread explanation does not account for distance between ignition points. The surviving records suggest atmospheric phenomena we do not have good explanations for, and the records that might have explained it are gone. Here is what I want you to think about. When something major happens in American history, we remember it. The San Francisco earthquake, 1906. Every American knows this. The Johnstown flood, 1889, massive event, documented extensively. But the fires of 1871, 36 cities, potential continental scale catastrophe, and we remember exactly one. Why? Immediately after the fires, there was an investigation. The Chicago Fire Department documented everything. Interviews with survivors, damage assessments, timeline reconstructions. They were building a comprehensive account. But in 1872, something changed. The investigation records were transferred to private custody. The Chicago Historical Society took ownership of them, and most of what followed was private rather than public. Meanwhile, investigations into the other fires were fragmented. Different jurisdictions, different states, no central authority coordinating them. And gradually, over the next 20 years, the other fires disappeared from the historical narrative, not because they were unimportant, but because the infrastructure that documented them was dismantled. The Peshtigo fire, which killed 2,500 people, more deaths than Chicago, was documented by local surveyors, but most records were housed in the Peshtigo courthouse, which burned again in 1892, 21 years after the original fire. The Port Huron fire records. transferred to Michigan State Archives in 1885, and many pages are missing from the original documents. Water damage, according to the notes. Pages 47 to 89 of the original account, gone. The Holland, Michigan fire records. The surveyor who documented them died in 1889. His personal papers dispersed to family members and regional museums, then disperse again. Do you see the pattern? Not one catastrophic event where records are destroyed, but systematic removal of documentation. Building by building, archive by archive, paper by paper, until the only surviving narrative is the one about Chicago, the one with a simple explanation, the one with a single cause, the one that does not require us to question the official account. The Chicago records were preserved, deliberately, extensively, expensively preserved. Private institutions took charge of them, ensured their survival, made them accessible but on controlled terms. For the other fires, there was no such preservation effort, no systematic archiving, no private institution stepping in, just gradual loss. It is possible that is because Chicago was more important, more significant, more worth preserving. But it is also possible that some narratives are more valuable to preserve than others, and that when a narrative becomes inconvenient, when it suggests something larger than a simple story about a cow and a lantern, there are mechanisms that ensure it disappears, not through dramatic destruction, but through the much more efficient method of simple neglect, the kind of neglect that is hard to prove was intentional. Now I want to ask a different question. What specifically was burning in these cities? Not just buildings, but what kinds of buildings? In Chicago, government records buildings, land deed offices, the courthouse area. In Peshtigo, the lumber mill records, the logging company headquarters. In Port Huron, the harbor master's office, the shipping records, land claim offices. In Holland, municipal records, land surveys. Here's what I noticed. The fires did not burn randomly. The most severe damage occurred in specific zones. Government administrative buildings, records offices, land deed repositories, surveying offices, property claim archives, places where documentation was kept. Now, this could be coincidence. In wooden building cities, everything was close together, and if fire started in one area, it would burn nearby buildings, which might include record offices. But look at the geographic spread. Peshtigo was timber country, with the most severe fire damage in the commercial district and lumber offices. Port Huron was a shipping town, with damage centered on harbor records and shipping documentation. Holland was agricultural, with damage in the land survey office and deed repository. These are not patterns you would expect from random fire spread. These are patterns you would expect if specific buildings were targets or specific buildings were allowed to burn while others were protected. I found something interesting in the Port Huron fire records, the surviving pages. There's a description by a firefighter named Robert Mack who wrote, "Many buildings in the waterfront district were spared. Despite being surrounded by fire, the records office burned completely. It was as if the flames were directed there." That sentence appeared in the original 1872 publication, but does not appear in any modern historical account. When the records were transferred in 1885, that observation was apparently lost. I am going to be careful with my language here, because I understand how this sounds. I am not saying firefighters started the fires. I am not saying there was a coordinated arson campaign. I am saying that the pattern of what burned suggests either the fires were directed by natural forces that concentrated damage in specific areas, or there were human decisions made about where resources were allocated to fight the fires. Some buildings were protected, others were allowed to burn, and the ones that were allowed to burn were the ones holding records. And when you combine that with the disappearance of documentation, with the suppression of the other fires from the historical narrative, with the consolidation of all attention onto one fire, a pattern emerges, one that suggests someone benefited from the destruction of those records. Here is a fact that is not in most history books. The fires of 1871 occurred at a critical moment in American history, immediately after the Civil War, with land redistribution, property claims, railroad expansion, and contested land ownership, particularly in the Midwest. After the Civil War, the government had massive amounts of property to dispose of. Railroad companies were being given land grants. Settlers were claiming territory under the Homestead Act. Native Americans were being displaced. All of this created documentation problems. Conflicting claims, overlapping deeds, contested titles. The records that clarified these disputes were in the courthouses and deed offices that burned in 1871. I researched one specific case in Port Huron where there was a disputed land claim involving a railroad company and local settlers. The claim was in the harbor master's records, which burned, and the railroad company prevailed in the dispute, receiving 40,000 acres that would have gone to settlers under the Homestead Act. This happened in Holland, Michigan as well. Logging companies received favorable claims after deed offices burned. In Wisconsin, timber rights were awarded to corporations that would have been disputed if the original surveys had survived. I am not telling you this was coordinated. I am telling you that destroying records creates opportunity for those with resources to recreate favorable documentation, for those with legal power to make new claims stick, for those who benefit from uncertain property titles. The railroads benefited from destroyed records. The timber companies benefited. The corporations expanding into Western territories benefited. The settlers and Native Americans whose claims were in destroyed records did not benefit. And the narrative that emerged from the ashes. One fire, one simple cause. One story that does not require us to ask questions about what record were lost or who had the power to decide which record survived. I keep returning to the same question. When the historical record is fragmented in a way that benefits the powerful, is that negligence or something else? Let me summarize what we know. 36 American cities burned in October 1871. The simultaneity of these fires is difficult to explain through normal fire dynamics. The scientific evidence suggests atmospheric phenomena that were not fully documented or understood. The records that survived are biased toward Chicago. The records from other fires were systematically dispersed and lost. The buildings that burned most completely were records offices. The consequences of destroyed records benefited specific interests. Railroads, timber companies, corporations. The narrative that emerged, one fire, one cause, one story, is simpler than the evidence suggests it should be. Here is what I cannot tell you. I cannot tell you definitively what caused the fires. Comet debris, atmospheric phenomena, natural drought, some combination. I was not there. The people who were there are gone, and their records are gone too. I cannot tell you intentionality. Whether records were destroyed deliberately or through simple negligence, whether resources were withheld from some fires to protect others, whether any of this was planned. The evidence does not prove that. It just suggests that when the records are missing, we should be honest about what we do not know. But here is what the evidence does show. A pattern too precise to be coincidence. A pattern of record destruction that benefits specific interests. A pattern of historical suppression, where one narrative survived while others were allowed to disappear. And a present moment where we have accepted the simple story without asking why the complex one was hidden. The map is real. The fires happened. The records disappeared. The question of what it means, that is up to you. Comment below if your city or region has an 1871 fire story that was never connected to the pattern. I am mapping every one, because the pattern only exists if we remember it exists.